Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure today to rise and speak against this budget that's before us, both on content and on process. Here we go again. We have a massive budget bill, and, you know, it's not a few pages. It's over 100 pages, impacting innumerable statutes and bills that need to be debated in this House. And I know my colleagues seem to find this funny. It's not about being able to read. I can assure them that I've learned to read at a fairly fast pace and comprehend. It is about Canadians' right to have this budget debated in this House for transparency and for discussion, and to give duly elected members of Parliament an opportunity to do their job as elected officials by providing debate and discussion and asking questions. And that is what is being denied once again in this House. And, Mr. Speaker, on content, when I look at this budget does very little, if anything, to grow jobs for Canadians. It does even less to protect the jobs that exist for Canadians. And it does very little to address the major challenges facing everyday Canadian families as they struggle to make ends meet. And, you know, Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives are trying to say, well, they can just rush through this bill, maybe because they really believe that there is not much in this bill and they have a lot to hide. Because maybe that's too scared for Canadians to take a look at this bill and know that there is no job creation measures, that there is nothing to make life more affordable and nothing to strengthen the services families rely on. And once again, Mr. Speaker, this government is trying to avoid public scrutiny over the measures that they are trying to ram through this House at breakneck speed. I also want to take an opportunity today, Mr. Speaker, to talk a little bit about an area that really impacts on immigration, citizenship, and multiculturalism. And first of all, this bill continues a pattern with which this government has made us all too familiar. It just keeps concentrating more and more power in the hands of the ministers so they don't have to come back into this House, in a parliamentary democracy, to have what they're trying to do being examined in any way. Mr. Speaker, this government has made a complete mess of the temporary foreign worker program. We've seen it over and over again in the media, whether it's the HD mining in BC, or whether it's the backlog of the live-in caregiver program, which, by the way, the minister himself addressed, is facing major problems and needs major overhaul. Whether it's the temporary foreign worker program that is currently under scrutiny because of the outsourcing of jobs at RBC, and notice that despite all of that kind of media attention on it, what actions has this government really taken? Here were Canadians doing jobs that workers were brought in to do, but Canadians were then asked, by the way, before you leave, can you train these new workers? Once again, Canadians being denied Canadian jobs. Over the last 2 weeks, several individuals have contacted my office to tell the same story. They were brought to Canada as skilled workers, only to lose their jobs once they acquired permanent residency, or those who were being let go of just before they qualified to apply for permanent residency, and therefore a new batch of temporary foreign workers could be brought in. And over the last number of weeks, we've heard again and again about staggering, and I'm talking about staggering abuses using the accelerated labour market opinions, which were only ever meant for highly skilled workers being used and abused in a way that once again shocked Canadians from coast to coast to coast. The intra-company transfers, once again, an abuse of the system in a massive way, Where are the investigations for all of these, and where are the fixes? This government, by the way, Mr. Speaker, has had an opportunity, no, several opportunities, several years to fix the temporary foreign worker programme. And again, it had an opportunity with this bill. But rather than actually fixing a programme that is wrought with flaws, a programme that desperately needs an entire overhaul to function and to be administered properly, the Conservatives just slop Band-Aids onto the holes, but only, Mr. Speaker, once they are exposed. Faulty LMOs are being doled out, not a problem for this government. They simply give their minister the power to suspend or revoke work permits that have already been handed out, but listen, only if they're caught and there is public oversight over it. And once again, this being done at the same time as this government is cutting funding to CIC and therefore limiting the kind of oversight that can be done over these files, over the granting of LMOs and the granting of the permits that go along with them. So rather than addressing the full scope of the problems with this programme, the Conservatives' Band-Aid in this case is another ministerial override when work permits and labour market opinions they have already approved. And this is post-approval, by the way, become political hot potatoes, all political expediency and a public relations exercise. This bill's improvements do not get to the heart of the mismanagement of the temporary foreign worker programme under this Conservative government. Next, this bill introduces privilege fees to be set out in regulations for employers that apply for work permits. The Minister has announced that this fee is in addition to the new fees announced in Budget 2013 for servicing TFW applications. The intention of the new fee, apparently, is that it will act as a disincentive for unnecessary use of the programme. Of course, given this government's record to date, there's no assurance that these fees won't be passed on to the temporary foreign workers themselves, and there is no measure anywhere cited to ensure they won't be. This government is now trying to fix problems they created the last time they tried to fix problems. Last time, what they did was allowed employers to pay up to 15% less. And guess what? In this House, we had a massive denial of that. And then, of course, outside at a press conference, the Minister said that programme is gone. The ALMO, which was hastily implemented and then not administered with very little oversight and abuse allowed to happen, and I would say allowed to happen because it went the ALMOs that were granted went way beyond the parameters that were set out for this particular programme, has been suspended temporarily. But once again, Mr. Speaker, once again, I want to say that we in the NDP are not opposed to a temporary foreign worker programme that addresses the real legitimate needs of skill shortages and acute labour shortages, where no Canadians are available to do the work. That is what we stand for, and yet this government, instead of protecting Canadian jobs and actually addressing the abuses that are happening, are once again looking for Band-Aid solutions. And, Mr. Speaker, forgive my scepticism, but we learned only yesterday that the Minister of Human Resources and Skills Development completely disregarded a briefing note that told her of almost 3,000 inappropriate uses of the TFW programme almost a year ago. Yet, a few weeks ago, ministers, parliamentary secretaries all feigned surprise and said they were moving quickly as soon as they found out there was a problem. Well, Mr. Speaker, in my world, the world I live in, over a year or a year and a half of waiting does not say that you're taking action quickly. This bill also, Mr. Speaker, does deny due process to refugees, and I really want to mention that. I know I'm getting the signal, I've run out of time, and there are all kinds of fees that the Minister no longer will have to come to this House to put into place, and we have major concerns about the lack of transparency of the usage of those fees. Thank you for your patience, Mr. Speaker.